you, friends. And welcome again. We're going to begin with introductions and then share a little bit about how the roundtable will work today. My name is Melinda Wenner Bradley. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a member of Westchester Meeting, and I serve Philadelphia Yearly Meeting as the Director of Program and Religious Life. I'm going to hand it down to the panelists to each introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Hazel Goodrich. I am currently the clerk of Monthly Meeting of Friends Philadelphia. This is where we meet on Sundays. I'm also on the board of the Arch Street Meetinghouse Preservation Trust.
Hello, friends. My name is Brian Blackmore. I use all pronouns used with respect. I tend to receive he, him, his. I'm the Director of Quaker Engagement at the American Friends Service Committee, which means that I help Quaker communities become more involved in AFSC's work to promote peace and justice in the world. I also have a part-time life as a researcher and historian of Quaker involvement in gay rights history. I just finished a doctoral dissertation last summer on that topic, and there'll be a book coming out hopefully later this year if everything goes as planned, as well as a public lecture series through Beacon Hill in Boston that will be available to be accessed virtually online. So many friends already today have been curious about my shirt. It's the kind of Quaker Oats guy who is not Quaker actually, as a Presbyterian minister that they appropriated the Quaker image for. And the shirt says, "Worship in silence, love out loud." Happy Friday, everybody.
So I'm Robin Moore, and I serve Friends as the Executive Secretary of the Friends World Committee for Consultation in the section of the Americas for about 1 more month. And I am going to start on Monday to be the clerk of Green Street Monthly Meeting here in Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, friends. My name is Dwight Dunstan. I use he, him pronouns. I am a member of Marian Meeting, though most of my worship the last few years has been at Kendall Hill, where I am the current host of the podcast called The Seed, Conversations for Radical Hope, as well as a facilitator for the year-long cohort known as Quaker, Quaker Coalition for Uprooting Racism. So happy to be here.
Thank you, friends. It was a thrill to reach out to these 4 friends and have all of them say yes. I'm really glad to have them all here today. So I'm going to provide a little bit of framework for the conversation and the topics today. And then each of the panelists will speak from their experience and their current work and ministries. And then we're going to turn it over to them to have a conversation with each other. There will be time for Q&A with the panelists after we close. If you find that you have a particular question you want to talk to them about or something that you want to be a conversation around, there'll be time for that after we close the roundtable. We're going to really let them have a conversation with one another and we'll all eavesdrop on what will be, I think, an amazing conversation. So when we conceived of the idea of having this conversation, we were having this 400th birthday party for George Fox. It was really clear to us planning in the yearly meeting and with our friends at Arch Street that we needed to not just be looking back, but looking forward. And I know that in my high school, there's this painting of George Fox. High school I went to, I'm in high school now, she thought I was saying that. There's a painting of George Fox, and he's on Pendle Hill with his arms stretched out. And he's very alone. We often think of Fox as being this figure who certainly was alone on Pendle Hill, having his great opening, but there were many, many other people who really crowd around this history and who are part of the wider and deeper history of our past and our present and looking into the future. So those stories involve people who came from other places and nurtured and shaped early Quaker community and choices and opinions in the past that we might not feel align with our faith and our practice today. And the fact that there's been almost 4 centuries of global diffusion and the places that Quakerism has gone that creates the diversity, both theologically and regionally for us as Friends today. So this roundtable brings together friends who are sharing their leadership and ministry today in Quaker meetings, in organizations, and other communities, out on the communications that go out from places like podcasts that George Fox could never have conceived of, probably. And so we're looking Fox forward, and each of them are going to share a reflection, and then we'll have that conversation. And in preparation for today, the panelists received 4 queries, and we're not going to hold them to speaking to just these queries today, but I'll share them with you as what we began thinking about in preparing. Which aspects of the Quaker tradition speak to you? How do they apply to the 21st century? Which aspects of the Quaker tradition are most important to pass on to the next generation and newcomers? Are there aspects of the Quaker tradition that it's time to release for Quakerism to thrive? And early Friends actions were seen as radical in their time. How can we respond to the challenges of our time in a way that builds on that history and other insights? So I turn it over to you. I'm not sure where we're going to begin, but Brian, are you starting?
Sure.
So Friends, because it's Pride Month, I've been thinking about the intersections of Quakerism and gay liberation quite often. Many Friends are not aware of like the really incredible contributions that Quakers have made to defending the rights of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and other queer people. Quakers were the first to operate a social service organization for gay people in the late 1940s. Quakers were the first religious organization to write a public and positive evaluation of gay and lesbian sexuality in 1963, before the Stonewall riots, before kind of the launch of the gay rights movement. Right here in this building, the biggest gay rights march on Washington was organized in 1979. I could go on and on. FGC, 1972, the first positive public evaluation of bisexuality written by any group in the United States, religious or otherwise. So something I hope for Quaker communities is to be a little more proud and prideful, if you will, about what we've done, not just for LGBTQ plus people, but as conscientious objectors in our resistance to war, as early abolitionists, although we have some complexity and some truth and reconciliation to do around our complicity in slavery and white supremacy over the many long history that we've had. So that has been on my mind. There's a song by Sarah Bareilles that I used to think about right before students that I used to teach at Westtown School, Quaker Day and boarding school outside of Philadelphia. As they were approaching graduation, I would play this song at home, and it goes like this. And it's a song she actually wrote for a friend of hers that was considering coming out to his family. And the words say what you want to say. Let the words fall out. I just want to see you be brave. And when I think about Fox and the Valiant 60 and those early rabble-rousers, I just admire their bravery. I admire their like extraordinary courage to go into churches and interrupt the minister as they were giving a sermon and being like, what you're saying is malarkey and like this is ridiculous. And they would do that in courts, they would do that before royalty, before all the different kind of positions of power in the time. And they went to jail for it. that there was this whole thing put together called the Meeting for Sufferings, where friends organized themselves to take care of loved ones whose, siblings, fathers, mothers, grandparents had been thrown in jail for their prophetic witness, for their boldness, for their braveness, for their courage. And responding to some of the other queries that Melinda has lifted up, I'm concerned that we're losing that braveness and that courage. And I sometimes am concerned that we're not willing to take as many risks and accept as many consequences. How many of us are risking arrest to stand up for what we believe? We have some really incredible folks like George Lakey right here, who's done it many, many times, and others. But with incredible injustices in the world right now around mass incarceration, wars in Gaza, Myanmar, and Sudan, the economic violence that keeps people in poverty in the United States, I am still holding out hope that Quakers will return to that bravery and return to that courage and be a little more I don't want to say righteous because I think we got righteousness down packed. A little more maybe vulnerable. Maybe that's what it is, right? That sometimes our peace testimony gets couched in places that are too safe.
So I don't know if I can follow that, because like I said, he's way more exciting than, and I think he's doing some phenomenal things. For me, with the queries, what spoke to me was, community. And that's probably one of the reasons Melinda asked me to speak today. She happened to be upstairs one day doing something, and I was running in and out of the room because there's a pantry upstairs that we started here. So the monthly meeting, along with the meeting house, we have a pantry that provides food and personal care products and household items. And also we have a community fridge, which is right out the door there. And it's just trying to take care of that. Community fridge is the only one in Center City currently. There are some in South Philly, there are in Fishtown, but that is the only one within Center City. And it is lovely that, we opened, it was dedicated during fall sessions in November. And ever since we're getting to be more well-known. It's available to anyone as long as the grounds are open, which is from about dawn to dusk, daily. And I do think we're serving a purpose for people who wouldn't otherwise have stuff. We have some regulars who probably use it, with the heat going on. There were quite a few people coming by to get water. So it is lovely that we're able to serve the community and those that are not those who have some food insecurities. And it's a very good thing that we're doing around here. And we've partnered with a couple of organizations, and they provide food to fill the fridge, and other members and such provide donations so that we keep the fridge fully stocked. One of the organizations is Sharing Excess, and also Share Foods. And it is, I think it's working. It seems to be working, and I hope that we'll be able to help more people going forward.
So Some of my favorite things about our Quaker tradition come from George Fox. He had that vision of a great people to be gathered. Combine that with his insight that Christ Jesus was directly available to him, was in fact the only one who could speak to his condition. But in the late 1600s, Fox and some others established a system of local and regional structures to give coordination and coherence to the wide-ranging movement of the Holy Spirit and individual leadings that we now call the Religious Society of Friends. Monthly, quarterly, and yearly meetings. The genius was in the simplicity and the flexibility of that system. And it is still a generally useful system today. I see and hear around me that God is still calling human beings into beloved community. And I believe that Christ Jesus can still speak to our condition. However, over the last 200 years, we as friends have repeatedly succumbed to the separating spirit. And in my observations, this is true all over the world. Over the course of the 20th and 21st century, the number of yearly meetings has grown and grown. And combined with the human and individualist motivation to start new organizations, maybe especially in the United States, this has led to an unsupportable burden on the people called Quakers. Over the last 50 years or so, the number of Quakers in the United States has shrunk by more than 10% in the last 10 years. The number of volunteer leaders who are talented, trained, and available has also decreased. The number of local meetings and yearly meetings that are having trouble finding clerks for their committees or the whole is too many to count. And how long has that been going on? We cannot sustain all of the infrastructure that has grown up over the 20th and 21st century. I live here in this city of 1.6 million people and 8 monthly meetings within the city limits. And that doesn't count all the meetings in the near suburbs. I am a member of the monthly meeting that's closest to my house. But there is another liberal, unprogrammed meeting 1 block away. And both congregations could fit in either meeting house easily. But the mutual sense of superiority between both of them prevents them, or us, from even considering how we might work more closely together. The sin of pride has infected the Religious Society of Friends, and it will be our downfall if we continue to insist on sustaining all the divisions and iterations of the Quaker movement. Friends, the time has come for an antidote to the separating spirit and the sin of pride that infects us. What friends need now is an angel of merging. We also need an angel of mercy, but that would be an So I said an angel, a messenger of God's word to us. And I'm thinking of this kind of like Walter Wink talks about the angels of our institution. An angel of merging. And I mean merging in the sense of combining monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, yearly meetings, and the wider Quaker bodies into fewer separate institutions. It's not the only way forward, but it has to be one of the considerations. So I was talking to a friend about this a few months ago, and she agreed that in her region of the US, there were several meetings that might be candidates for mergers. But then she shook her head and she said, but they won't do it. They'd rather close than merge with each other. Oh, ouch. And I have heard essentially the same story several times since then from folks in other parts of the country. How we're not like those other friends in our quarterly meeting. You know, what's interesting is that I don't hear a lot of envy of other Quaker meetings. So maybe that's a sin that we are mostly avoiding by thinking overtly or quietly that we are actually holier than they are. What about where you live? Would the small meetings in your area rather die than merge with each other? What about your yearly meeting? Is it thriving? Do you have all the clerks that you need? Are more or fewer people coming to sessions than there were 10 years ago? What about 60 years ago? Are there other yearly meetings that, like yours, in the same boat? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. There are other yearly meetings like yours that are having the same problems. Merging has happened in the past. Canadian yearly meeting brought together friends across a whole continent in the middle of the 20th century. In the eastern United States, the Hicksite and Orthodox meetings broke apart and came back together over the course of 150 years. Some would say we're still working on it.
Yeah.
Britain yearly meeting has made some significant changes recently, combining several local worshiping communities in what they call an area meeting, which is somewhere between what we would call a monthly meeting and a quarterly meeting. And even before the pandemic, they were experimenting with digital or online meetings for business because it was just too far to travel. Honestly, one of the reasons that monthly and quarterly meetings were set up as they were was because it wasn't reasonable to ride your horse any farther every Sunday. And there wasn't a way for us to hear what was being said in the room if we weren't physically present. The technology of the 21st century has made communication over wider distances more feasible. We have learned in my monthly meeting, in many yearly meetings, in the Friends World Committee, that it is possible to do a lot of our routine business via electronic media. Email and video conferencing and digital file storage have all improved vastly, and many more of us have learned how to use them in the last 5 years. Technology is not the answer to all our problems, but it is a tool we could use more effectively. I want to say very clearly that this is not the same meeting as Convergent Friends. For those of you who know me, much of my public ministry has been about finding the commonalities among different branches of Friends. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I am not suggesting that the Evangelical Friends Church and the Liberal Unprogrammed meeting should merge. I'm talking about the urban and suburban meetings in the same city, having multiple times and places for worship, but only one business meeting. The two meetings near my house would tell you that they are very different. But I think that God has given us all the gifts we need to be a thriving community. But they are spread out across the three monthly meetings in Northwest Philadelphia that are within 15 minutes of each other. If they actually work together, maybe we would be a fully functioning Quaker meeting. But we have to let go of thinking that we are better than they are. Merging could enable small meetings to reach the critical mass necessary to provide a robust spiritual formation for adults of different ages and interests. Age-appropriate programs for all our children. Maybe we could offer competent and robust pastoral care. Maybe we would have better accountability of record keeping and the administration of property and finances. Maybe we would be able to find enough clerks to run all our business meetings. Maybe we wouldn't struggle to find enough treasurers for all our organizations. So, merging local meetings, quarterly meetings, yearly meetings, and the other kinds of Quaker organizations. It is an option. It's not the only way forward, but it could help. What is not an option is to continue going the way we are. The time has come for an antidote to the separating spirit and the sin of pride. I pray that an angel of merging may come upon us and guide us forward into the land of milk and honey.
I'm going to invite us all to take a breath in and out. One more breath in and out. And an invitation to stay in your breath during our time together, but I knew for me I wanted to do that because I believe that it's a very radical act to be able to breathe with one another, do this very human thing with one another in our lives and our days. We don't always get the chance to do that, and in a room full of friends and acquaintances or new relationships, it's not always given that we'll be able to slow down and breathe together. And so I believe we do that, or I like to believe that in doing that, we not only liberate ourselves through reconnecting with our bodies, but liberate one another through that breath. And also it extends backwards to our ancestors who might not have always had the time to slow down and breathe thoughtfully and intentionally. And I believe it extends forward as well to generations to come. I'm on a panel with so many brilliant people, and very grateful, Melinda, for the opportunity to be here. And I think I'll just share 4 minutes, 5 minutes of some thoughts that are connected and also are coming from, just dropping down into my gut, which is where spirit lives for me. There's a beautiful question and challenging question, requires me to be brave to really look at, around the future of Quakerism, the future of Friends, and what's at stake. And it's not a surprise that it's coming alongside conversations about the future of democracy in this country. For anybody who maybe watched the debate the other day, after the end of the debate, there was, on social media and in the news, there was so much uproar about, things just feel shaky. The foundation of our society and the systems and things that are in place feel shaky. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, of course, aspects of Quakerism also feel shaky right now. Things are being uprooted and asked to be interrogated and asked to be thrown out or composted or burned down or rebuilt. It feels like quite a fertile time for many aspects of our society, including the religious society of Friends. And one of the things that I feel very blessed to have been able to do through the podcast is connect with folks who are Quaker and Quaker adjacent folks, to ask them about their callings and their vocations and what they feel like is needed in order to support the evolution of our species and point it towards survival. And these folks come from many different walks of life. But one of the things I'm really thinking about, and it really does connect with this question of courage. In this last season, I asked the guest around what supports them to imagine, what supports their creativity and imagination. And the guests are incredible. They have incredible thoughts. They're part of incredible initiatives in the world that literally have impacted thousands, hundreds of thousands, have or will. And each one of the guests pointed back to the role of community in being brave. That was the through line between everyone, that it really was, and you started with this, and thinking about who was at the backs of, who was at the back of George Fox, who could George Fox lean on in order to be courageous as he was, and it was community. And so there's something, as I think about the question that was really landing on my heart, was sort of what do we need? What isn't serving the society of Friends anymore? And I think if I asked everyone in that room that question, we might have as many responses as there are people in the room, maybe some commonalities. But I imagine from your unique perspectives, you have something that speaks to you that's ready to be let go. And also, I imagine that folks have something that that is inspiring them about what we do already, something we want to keep, actually, something we want to bring forward with us in the evolution, the revelation that we are asked to really face right now. And I think to close, just some initial remarks here. I am really inspired by the idea of moving into the truth of connection, stepping away from the myth of separation and moving towards the truth of connection. And I think it does require us to think about all of the ways we've been taught to be, to other one another, which is also a lie, the lie of the othering, the lie of separation. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a letter to Martin Luther King, one of two correspondences I believe they had, it was very few. But before King got involved in protesting the Vietnam War, Thich Nhat Hanh knew very much King's readings and his philosophy. And he sort of wrote to him in a speech, I believe it's called, or some part of it is called, In Search of the Enemy of Man. So he knew that King had spoken about that there's no such thing as human enemies, but the real enemies are bigotry and militarism, and maybe there's one more in there, but there's something that I get really interested in looking at and facing in community around the things that are actually separating us from one another. And they're vast, they seem vast, they seem big, and also there have been generations of people in the recent histories and beyond who have faced these Goliaths of separations in order to bring people together. And there's something for us to really learn from in this time. So I wanna pause there and pass it back to my colleagues.
Okay, so when you were speaking about the work of the pantry, I'm pleased that in Germantown, the Green Street Friends School started a pantry or a community fridge out in front of their building, which is at the back of our meeting house property, or just the other side of the block. And I'm glad to hear that that's working well here in Center City as well. The opportunity for the meeting to be connected to that. But I was actually struck by something that you just said sort of in passing. But you talked about the meeting and the meeting house as separate institutions. And I think that's particularly clear here at Arch Street. But I think a lot of people have trouble seeing the difference or remembering that there's a distinction between our meeting and our meeting house. And I'm wondering, how is that relationship working together to support the work that you're doing in the community?
Arch monthly meeting of Friends of Philadelphia and Arch Street Meetinghouse are two separate entities. I think we might be the only one with this weird relationship. So apparently back in the 60s, the meeting decided to give the building away for whatever reason. So we are two separate entities. The meeting house is they handle everything related to renting out the building, the museum. They're responsible for everything. We do have it's covenant where we help the meeting house, but the monthly meeting is separate. It's a monthly meeting. We are, I think one of the conditions was we would remain here forever. And we have been in this meeting house since it was completed in 1803, which is a good thing. But it is, I think people get confused about the monthly meeting. Now, what was great, I hadn't been to meeting, and I was going through the minutes to find something. And Sean Connolly, who's the executive director, there was something in there talking about a pantry. And I'm like, oh, there's a pantry at the meeting house? You know, and I'm asking the current clerk at the time, and they're like, no, but why don't you talk to Sean? And I had already, so I've been doing this, I guess it's sort of been my calling for a while. I used to do extreme couponing, and the basement of my house looked like a store. And we would do a distribution once a month, and I did it with Friends Rehabilitation Program, which had housing in the city for seniors and others. So that's how I started doing that. I sold my house, didn't have anywhere for that much stuff. And I spoke to Sean, and he said, oh, let me see if I can find somewhere for you to be. And he did. We got a little closet upstairs. But it was small. That started in July of 2022. And I was still working with other organizations. I know the meeting house had wanted to do a community garden, but that just didn't take off. They started the beds, but it was never continued. So, because this is so important to me, and it's something that I think, I like to help other people. So the meeting house and the meeting decide, and that's, if you look us up, it's a combination of both. And both Sean and other people, Kayla here has been phenomenal, because for a while I was a little disheartened. It seemed like I was buying stuff for like probably 4 people, the same 4 people every week. But Kayla's been very, she's been amazing and found partners for us. But it is, I think, it is a weird relationship. Like most meetings in the meeting house, it's the same thing, they might own it. But, yeah, and given that this is a historic building, there's a museum. But it is, I think we may have gotten off to a little rocky start for a while. But I think that cohesiveness and working together, we've come a long way. And I think we're at a very good point right now, the meeting house and the meeting. There's a line of communication that's open between the two of us, so we don't have any of the little struggles that we had for a little period there. So, but if anybody wants to know more about the distinction, I will be more than happy to chat about that.
I'd like to throw out a question for my panelists, friends by my side. I'm thinking about how we evolve as a religious community, how we've been evolving since the time of George Fox, how we lean into this concept of continuing revelation that Quakers talk about, where truth is not finalized, but is continually unfolding in our lives, and we're seeking it out and trying to reach for it, and still retain a sense of an intelligible identity. That Quakerism has a shape that we can understand. Many of our Quaker communities are trying to become anti-racist communities. And something I hope for and worry sometimes that is lost is that a community that successfully becomes anti-racist must look radically different than what it was before. It was an anti-racist community. It sounds different, it feels different, it moves differently, it has a different shape. And so I think there's some anxiety in the Quaker world about losing what friends had appreciated and loved during their formation of their own Quaker identity, their own connections with friends. If I could bring this out a little more by maybe sharing a story where I was teaching at Westtown, and at Westtown and in many Quaker schools, There's just a few of the card carrying friends. Y'all might have noticed that I didn't give my membership street cred when I introduced myself, but I'm a member of Gainesville Monthly Meeting, if anyone was worried. But so you get looked to, right, by the other faculty, like, is what's happening here Quakerly? Is this following Quaker principles? Or often Quakerism would be weaponized. Oh, this action that the administration wants to take, it's not simple enough. Or, this kind of statement doesn't align perfectly with the peace testimony. And in my personal journey, I'm starting to lose any sort of assertion that there's something universal or essential to Quakerism. That what we like to think what we do now is exactly the same as what Fox and Friends did 400 years ago, but I think it's actually very, very different, and we wouldn't recognize it if we saw it in front of our eyes. My sister lives in East Africa, and she does work there. The largest population of Quakers in the world is in Kenya, 3 times as are in the United States. They have a building called the International Friends Center in Nairobi. 3 worships happen on a Sunday morning. 2 are programmed and 1 is unprogrammed. So I'm curious, right? I'm gonna go check it out. And the programmed worship had hundreds of people, and it was loud, and there was guitars and drums and jumbo screens. There was prayer, there was a sermon. It was nothing like what happens in this space here at Arch Street Meeting. I went to the unprogrammed worship. There were 2 people there, both white American expats that have moved to Kenya. Unprogrammed Quaker worship has not animated the spirit of Kenyan friends. And so our ways of worship are so diverse and different that I don't know that there's something essential to what Quaker worship is about. Similarly, the peace testimony, right? Many friends participated in the Civil War because they believed that the abolition of slavery was more important than commitments to nonviolence. Similarly for the Revolutionary War. I don't think we can claim that you must be a pacifist to be Quaker and then wield that principle and weaponize it against friends who take a different stance. Even in my position as Director of Quaker Engagement at AFSC, the organization that received the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the Religious Society of Friends, I'm often approached and said and asked to make comment about this school or this Quaker organization or this meeting is not enacting the peace testimony in the ways that I see fit. So I'm just curious in both on the community level here at Arch Street, macro level, throughout the section of the Americas, and in your journey teaching, Dwight, in many different Quaker spaces. How do we retain a sense of Quaker identity that makes sense and yet allow ourselves to evolve and change and adapt and become different communities that were not recognizable before?
Now, as somebody who worships in this space every Sunday, there for the last year and a half, there's been a very interesting and exciting growth here at Arch Street. And I would say we're probably considered the more conservative. I know when I joined here back in 90-something, I was one of the younger people here in the meeting. Now I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I am also, okay, so we look around here. I am the only Black woman I can see. There's 2 Black people here in this meeting, in this gathering right now. We both happen to be up here. As the clerk of this monthly meeting, I am gonna say, and being the first Black clerk of this meeting, every time I get asked to do something, I feel like I have to. You have people, this meeting house is special because it is in the historic district. So we probably have more non-Quakers coming in here than Quakers. And without fail, you get Quakers still worship. I mean, this happened like 3 times this week. I'm also a docent here. I feel like I have to, want something else. People think, oh, Quaker, so they see old, the pictures. No, I'm a real life Quaker. And we do have other people of color who come to meeting. We have Black people here at meeting. They're younger, which is one thing that's been really exciting for us. A lot of young people are coming to meeting for worship on Sunday. And I've listened to some of them talk, and for whatever reason, I would not think that Arch Street is where young people are attracted to. Surprisingly, they are. Before the pandemic, if we had 22 people here on a Sunday, that was a good Sunday. Lately, it's high 40s to low 70s. And I'm gonna say on average, it's probably about high 40s to about mid 50s every Sunday. And a lot of those people are young. And we are having some growing pains. It's trying to get used to things that, we have some attenders who may not be fully aware of Quaker, the way things work. A lot of the older people like the quiet and don't do anything to draw attention. And we have someone who likes to express himself through dance. And you do have people that are a little, upset about that, so to speak, just don't want that to happen. But I think in order for us to evolve, we kind of have to be open, because younger people are not like the older people. So there's no way we can expect to move forward if we're not willing to meet these younger people halfway, and kind of get rid of some of the standard old Quaker way of doing things. And someone in here said, one of the members said, well, it's just the way we're used to doing things. And I think, but at the same, they said that, but it was also sort of like, that's just how we do things, but it doesn't mean that's how we have to continue doing things. And I think in order for us to survive, we need to be more open, more accepting. And then hopefully I won't have to do all the panels by myself. So.
Can you say the question one more time? I have the core of it, but I want to make sure I don't.
How do we retain a sense of Quaker identity that is intelligible and we can understand, and still evolve and become something new that might not be recognizable from how things have been?
Yeah, there's at least 2, maybe 3 things that come to mind. One, I think there are so many Quaker, what I call Quaker technologies, ways of connecting with spirit, ways of grounding, ways of connecting with one another that are in our repertoire, but that we don't, as a community, know how to use. Like I remember first hearing about the process of a clearness committee. And I went to Quaker school. I did not grow up Quaker, but I came to Quakerism through Quaker school to begin with, and then joined a meeting. And I had heard about clearness committees, but it wasn't until I was, I think, 27 that I actually engaged in my first process. And so I don't know how many friends in this room have experienced this technology, but it's incredible. It's an incredible technology that we have. Marcel Martin, who who some friends might know, led a 10-week course called Nurturing Faithfulness last year that I was a part of. And she introduced me to this idea of faithfulness groups. Now, it might not have been what George Fox had in the beginning, but it's something that's, I believe, has evolved within Quakerism. An incredible technology, similar to clearance committees, but also very different. You know, this idea of accompanying one another or someone with something they're trying to be faithful to, you know, and we would ask one another in these small quads, when it was your turn to be sort of at the center of attention, what is God calling you to be faithful to? And to ask someone that over 10 months is an incredibly powerful technology, right? And to sit with them and be present with them, and see that answer evolve over time is an incredible technology. You know, there's threshing sessions, there's the ways of clerking, there's so many technologies that I think are kind of floating up here that we've actually not grounded in practice. So there's some part of me that's like, before we throw everything away, like, can we see if the thing still works if we plug it in? You know, like, it might still work. You know, we haven't really plugged it in a while. Now, if we plug it in and it don't work, you know, we can recycle it. You know, but there's some part of me that feels that. The second thing, and the last thing, anyone who knows me knows that I talk a lot about grief. I talk a lot about grief and the power of grief and the power of dying well. So I heard you talk about, like, folks saying they would rather die than merge, and it's a striking statement. And one of the thoughts was, do we know how to die well? Because I think we can die and actually leave the crap for the next generation to work through, and that's actually, to me, my thoughts. You know, not represent anybody, but I'm like, yeah, that's actually not a death that is maybe in alignment with the arc of justice. You know, and it's just true that some of us will be able to do some things that other of us won't be able to. So there's some of us who maybe need to hold on to things or won't be a part of change in the ways that others will be. But I get curious about this question of, do I need to stand in your way as the new was being ushered in? You know, can I maybe not be a part of that change, but not stand in its way? And there is something about death, which is, I feel the weight when I say it, but there's something about dying well that I actually think is a part of bringing in new, vibrant life. And it feels natural, it feels universal, and it feels, and we don't feel well practiced in it, is the truth, as a culture. So this is no shade on our society, friends, but there's something, I'm very interested. I'm writing a book right now for teachers in schools, and I'm making a case that in the last 4 years there have been 6 mega cultural tragedies: COVID, the murder of George Floyd, the turning over of Roe v. Wade, affirmative action, the war in Gaza, and I'm arguing January 6th of last year. That these things have compounded just in the last 4 years, and our Quaker schools and their teachers weren't able to recover from any of them. And so our young people are under the weight of them and looking to the adults who haven't quite been able to recover and are still trying to go business as usual. But there's this deep grief. There's just this deep grief, arguably all of us face, but certainly in our Quaker schools, which is the group I'm speaking to, that these places feel. And there's actually a need for the people that are in them, starting with no one steal my idea, by the way. I'm writing this book. Don't steal this idea. I'm giving you it, or maybe steal it and make it better. But the point I'm trying to prove 2 things. One is that our adults in those communities, there's a skill set that I'm hoping to be able to transfer for when the next big thing comes, because it's coming. If anything in the last 4 years has taught us something's coming, to be able to meet the moment of grief or despair that our young people face and keep them connected. Once again, this idea of community and how do we not lose each other and isolate, you know, how do we stay connected? when these heavy griefs come. And then two, really thinking about what do our young people say about these things that are happening, and really investing in their voices to manifest the new technologies. I think from there actually is where some of the newest, freshest ideas will come from. And maybe they're not in this room, the young people right now, but they're coming to our meetings, and they're going to have the technologies and the insights to help spark the change and be a part of deciding which appliances we want to plug in and some work, or which it's time to recycle.
To follow on that, actually. In the last few years, I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of friends about the life cycle of meetings, and to be honest about the fact that I learned that the average lifespan of a religious congregation is about 100 years. So some last longer, and some don't last that long. But it's actually a normal thing for religious congregations to grow in a place, and then things change or people move, and the church or the Quaker meeting has to move with it. And that question about how do we approach the end of the life of a meeting with dignity and grace, there are technologies for doing that. We can learn from other, from the hospice chaplain, hospice movement. We can learn from other denominations that are also going through the same ending of things. So I'll say you can find more information about that if you're actually interested. On the FWCC website, under our news section, you'll find the links to that. But I think it's an important thing that, dealing with the grief, but also thinking about what our legacy will be, is an important role for religious communities. And it's important for us to do that well, and to not leave the junk or the property or the illegal mess to the next generation, and how a little bit of forethought can help us prevent that in a lot of ways. And religious congregations, as much as families, need to actually deal with that. One of the points of religious community is to help us to actually face the hard things in our lives. And so we need to do that for each other. I was going to say about the how to retain our identity and keep changing. I've heard a metaphor of jazz musician have to learn, first you have to learn the scales, you have to play your instrument, and you have to learn the tradition of your genre. And then you can improvise, and people will know when they hear it, this is still jazz. But if you don't actually know the traditions, if you can't reference the pieces that have been important in the generations before, then you could be making music, but people will hear it and go, actually, it's like there's something that's not jazz. Right? So Quakers can have that same experience of having to remix the tradition that we've inherited with for the context that we're in. And I think we can keep doing that, and we'll know, we'll feel God is still calling us to be in direct communication with the divine. And you could use different words for that. You could actually respond in different ways, in dance, in sitting, in running, meeting for worship, for bicycling, whatever. But it's still about responding to that direct experience of the Holy Spirit, of that transcendent space that I think George Fox responded to that. Rufus Jones responded to that. Lucretia Mott responded to that. Hazel is responding to that. I am responding to that. It's still here for us. And I think that God is still calling us and offering us that, like, strength and beauty and kindness that we could turn to. Or we don't have to call it God, but I think without that sense of the transcendent, that it's not really Quaker anymore. And not everything is going to be. I think that's the other thing we actually have to say.
An hour goes by really fast. I want to say thank you to all of you as we begin to think about transitioning into the next part of the afternoon. There'll be a workshop next door from Friends Peace Team's Power of Story. And thank you each for bringing powerful ministry to us this afternoon. Thank you for helping us look forward. Thank you for invoking our young people, what you shared. I recently was thinking about the story of the Children of Reading meeting. How many people know that story? We tell it all the time. And I was thinking about how we often talk about that story through the framework of how courageous the children were. That first fathers and men were taken away and arrested, then women and mothers were taken away, and that the children stayed and worshiped together. And I feel like whenever that story's been told to me, the focus has been on how brave they were. And I wonder how we would look at that story differently if we focused on the fact that they knew how to worship together. That they had been taught and were sitting in the truth of worshiping with one another. It was a tradition that they had been invited into, were part of. So thank you for bringing young people into what you shared. And I think that while you looked forward with us, there were things that Fox and Phil and others would have heard echoes of in what you shared with us today. Community and hospitality and courage and truth and seeking new ways, not sitting in what that's the way we've always done it, but seeking new truth. So thank you all. Thank you. Dwight and Robin and Hazel and Brian are going to stay around for a little while. So again, first off, there are more cupcakes, please. I really don't want to take. And they're in the Easter room, I suspect still. There is the Power of Goodness program next door, I think at 2:30, but if you'd like to come, it's in this room. Okay, thank you, thanks, Jonathan. But we have a little bit of time if you would like to check in with a panelist, bring forward a question or your own gratitude. Thank you, friends.
Thank you.